I know the human being and fish can coexist peacefully.
The Whistling in the Dark podcast by Patrick Bradley.
I'm pro-organization, but anti-government. The difference between simple human organization and government is the use of aggressive violence. It comes across to me like, pro wrestling. Some fake two-sided battle, between people that behind scenes are friends.
There's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, "Fool me once, shame on you." If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
Hey, welcome back. Episode 32, Whistling in the Dark podcast. I'm Patrick Bradley, down here in Atlanta, Georgia. Today is Tuesday, April 30th, 2019. It's been a little while. I think a couple weeks since my last episode, and I think the previous episode I talked about Assange and then being arrested, and the episode before that was about that New Zealand mass shooting. And since then, we have had a Easter Sunday attack in Sri Lanka that killed hundreds of people, that bombed churches and I think like hotels or something, but definitely like a Muslim attack on Christians, or some militant Muslim group or whatever. I don't know. I think maybe ISIS wound up claiming credit for it. Anyway, so the hits keep on coming, and what else happened? A big news that dominated headlines for a while was the Notre Dame in Paris catching on fire. It's been, it's probably just a fire, but it's pretty interesting. The reactions, the responses. Not too surprised that people, anything that happens, you're gonna, especially people on our end of the spectrum, are gonna think, or at least wonder, is there more to the story? Was it really an accident? But it's pretty weird, the amount of stuff you see where it's like people are happy that this church burned down, or don't like it. It's some even it's the French leader's name, Macron. He's talking about how it's like they shouldn't just something about, really badly paraphrasing this, but something about how you shouldn't like rebuild it the way it was. They should put their new like stamp on it. Paul Joseph Watson has a pretty funny video talking about this, and he also he goes through like a bunch of examples of it where people have like architects have just like mangled these beautiful old buildings, and he cites a bunch of just different quotes and stuff surrounding Notre Dame and how it's just like, whoa, hopefully they don't fuck this place up. So yeah, let me play a little bit of it. I haven't like gone through this and figured out exactly where to do it, but he's pretty funny, and he's I'm certainly not like in perfect alignment with Paul Joseph Watson, but he's pretty on the money with this.
So the Notre Dame Cathedral was devastated by a blazing inferno, but that was nothing compared to the threat that it now faces from modernist architects. The French Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, has announced a competition for international architects to rebuild Notre Dame Cathedral's spire. We are not going to rebuild today by mimicry the image of the past. Architecture must represent our time. But surely you don't want to replace the sacred majesty of a 200-year-old Gothic spire, which perfectly complemented an 850-year-old cathedral, with some vulgar glassy steel monstrosity. Surely you wouldn't even think of, oh shit, new spire made from crystal, glass and stainless steel, just like the dome on the Reichstag, which looks fucking hideous. But if they just rebuilt it the same, it would be like visiting the Louvre and seeing a copy of the Mona Lisa. No, it would be like visiting the Louvre and seeing this. According to Rolling Stone's E.J. Dixon, Notre Dame is a deep-seated symbol of resentment, a monument to a deeply flawed institution, and an idealized Christian European France that arguably never existed in the first place. That's right.
Yeah. So anyway, he goes on with a whole bunch of different examples and stuff. And yeah, it's pretty ridiculous that, that sentiment. I mean, I don't know how prevalent that feeling is. Again, like I think of my kind of young liberal friends, and I think that they're pretty torqued up, but like anything anti-Christian is like in alignment with them, and which is pretty amusing. I just saw and actually made I don't know, it was an article I was just looking at, but it's actually the so I think Christianity is still, it's like over 30% of the world's population. It's the largest religious group still, which is interesting. I would have thought that, I don't know, something else was. But I guess until they really get religion in China, they're still shot. But, I mean, India's got 1 billion people. I guess maybe there's a significant Christian population there. I don't really know. But anyway, it's it's pretty weird, and that's kind of I think the theme for what I generally wanted to talk about today. The article I saw today that kind of pushed me over the edge to actually like turn on the microphone and start ringing up was about gender pay equality. Now it's now being enforced by law in Iceland, and actually I don't think it's just like just happened. I think it's like a year old, but anyway, so that'll be an interesting thing to talk about. But yeah, just in general, I mean, I guess the name identity politics is more or less like the accurate title to put on all of this, whether it's like Christian or a race or gender or sexual orientation, whatever it is, it's, you just see it, all, it's just constantly, I think like the thing I've been thinking the last week is how kind of marginalized my way of thinking that, that corporate media is propagandizing the U.S. population, for an agenda. And that's it. It's really odd. Like it's like people have now, since Trump has, I mainly think that it's like, since Trump sort of has that stance, and of course Alex Jones is always had that that stance. But since Trump is like, I mean, he's generally opposed to like CNN. I'm sure he doesn't also include Fox. But most of these, MSNBC or whatever. But, as we've, pointed out, I mean, most of the corporate media is, sort of pushing the sort of liberal agenda. And you really only have Fox as an actual sort of big media source. But, I mean, but Fox is like pushing like a neocon agenda more or less. They're not really, they're as different as like Obama and Bush were, just superficially different, but on the things that matter, the war machine, the war on drugs, the Federal Reserve, these types of things. I mean, the way they run the economy, and there's, maybe one guy will, one party will raise taxes by a few percent, another will reduce them, or just do some complex adding and reducing and reshuffling that nobody's even sure if taxes were raised or lowered, which is kind of like what Trump did. But I mean, but all of these companies, these news outlets are in, they're certainly in lockstep with the two major parties, right? And that's what we see. But, they're like, I feel it's just like a really weird thing, I mean, as a child, I romanticized the 60s a lot. And in my mind, it's like, oh man, like it just seemed like so amazing. Like all these people, really like young people really stood up, against the big, big machine, the big war machine, the politicians, and, particularly against against the Vietnam War, and, and also civil rights stuff. And now it's like, when I sort of felt as in my younger, I mean, when I was, I don't know, 18 to in my late 20s, at least, it was before I really ever got involved in anything. But there was certainly like an uptake of during the after 9/11, and then the Afghanistan war, and then the Iraq war, there was definitely a lot of anti-war protests going on, and there were people, again, like not, I'm what I'm getting at is just like how we as libertarians have like, I mean, I don't know that we have like an issue in common anymore, really, with any parties. It's certain. I mean, not really the Democrats. I mean, it's like they have like good. I think they sort of want this, equality thing, or they don't like racism, and I certainly don't like racism, but then they just go bad about it in like the worst way. But yeah, and I remember romanticizing that, and I was feeling like, oh, we don't really do that. We don't have that same energy anymore. It's like you felt like, as those people that were doing all that protesting, they grew up and eventually got like co-opted by the system or something anyway, right? Like, like if you were protesting, millions of people in their, early 20s were protesting, the Vietnam War. Where were they in, like, well, I guess it would be like in their 60s. But, there wasn't like a lot of like 50 and 60-year-olds, really in the anti-war movement that I saw in the early 2000s. But at least it was happening. And then, once Obama got elected, that ended. And And the last, to me, like the last gasp that we saw of what I would say is, again, not like perfect. I don't mean like theoretically, like the underlying solutions were not lined up necessarily with the, libertarians, but after the 2008 crash, and the Occupy Wall Street movement and all that stuff against the bailouts, that was the last time that I feel like libertarians would be out there protesting. And the thing that was kind of interesting is, the Occupy movement. I don't feel like that was just like only liberals. And certainly it was attractive to a lot of libertarians. Again, we had, probably very different ideas about what should happen. But we were unified, in the idea that these banks shouldn't be bailed out. We want to end the Fed. And that was always, I had some friends that were very, very involved in that stuff in Atlanta, particularly. And, it just always seemed like there was just the last step they just couldn't get. They couldn't get to it. Like they could go all the way up and see how these huge corporate banks like Bank of America and whatever are this problem or whatever. But they never could just, go that one step up the ladder to the Federal Reserve and the Federal Reserve system itself. Because it's like, why is it that all of the big banks suck? You know what I mean? And why doesn't it matter what their name is or who founded it? Like, you know what I mean? They're like automatons, what, I don't even know. Is it Wells Fargo and Bank of America? And Chase. I mean, is there one that you think is moral versus the other? It's like, no, they're not. That's not. They're an extension of this Federal Reserve system, and you got to look at the top and look, but it's very weird. It's like the media blackout sort of prevents, I think, the kind of normal, like left wing, because at that point, and I don't really know what was going on the media, but I would imagine the left wing media was a little more friendly to protesting the wars and stuff because it was a big Republican thing, the neocons, and when Obama came in, I mean, he's supposed to get us out. He's supposed to get us out of these wars, and obviously he didn't, and he started a bunch of new ones, but that we don't have to go into all that today. But yeah, this Occupy Wall Street that's the last time that I've really seen it, and now like the media wasn't. The big corporate machine was not trying to get young people out protesting the banking system. That's not their end game. That's not like their sort of divide and conquer, keep us sort of always fighting amongst each other and always focused on the wrong thing. It's like we were that group was really close. My friends were almost focused on the right thing. They were, like I said, just lift their head up just a few inches and they would have actually finally had their eyes on one of the actual problems. One of the things that if we fix that, if we got rid of that, there would be actual change in the United States. There would be a resurgence of prosperity, and the poor and the middle class would benefit greatly. It would be so much easier for them to save money and build wealth. They wouldn't have to just feel like they somehow have to dump their money into this, fucking casino stock market that they definitely don't understand, that they could actually their money would actually increase in value over time. The thing that they work for, you know what I mean? It's like, why, all right, well then fucking if dollars are always going to be worth less, then pay me in whatever the equivalent is right now, but in something that's going to be worth more. Maybe we could start to pay like poor, well, you can't really buy food with land, but in tiny pieces of land that they could put together, and I don't know, but that's the idea, right? Like you wouldn't even have to worry about necessarily buying real estate or anything, investing. Like you could actually save money and build wealth. You would actually be rewarded for spending less than you earn. But we all know that. So anyway, they were very close to seeing that, but they didn't. For the most part, they didn't. The libertarians in the crowd did. Well, to some extent, I guess. I sure as hell did. And I was in the crowd to some extent in the Occupy stuff, a little bit. I definitely was out protesting the bailouts. I certainly did that. I wouldn't say it was like in an Occupy, Wall Street thing as much as just protesting outside of the Atlanta Fed. So anyway, but since then, it's pretty much gone. What maybe the Tea Party movement kind of came, but certainly the liberals they're gone, right? Like they're no longer share like the libertarian ideal of like self-ownership as being, the big thing, right? Like, and they obviously never really cared about private property. But, they used to be anti-war. So that was cool. I don't know about war on drugs. Seems like kind of neither party really gives a shit about it at all. But yeah, there's nothing. So the Democrats are pro-war now. They don't give a fuck about the war on drugs, and they are absolute Wall Street whores. They're politicians. I saw a thing, Biden today, talking, Alex Jones had posted it. Sounded like he was having a fucking stroke when he was talking. But he, I heard him telling us something about like, this country wasn't built by big Wall Street hedge funds. And it's like, who the fuck are you talking to? Like, like, what a fucking hypocrite, Like he's here because Obama, and Obama was majorly supported, by the big banks on Wall Street, just like the Clintons, just like Hillary. They're the Wall Street crew. What the fuck are they talking? He's but it doesn't matter, right? Like people have like lost the ability to fucking reason out anything anymore. It's just like, I guess he said it, so it's true. But yeah, so, if you're, maybe, so what's out there now, well, I don't want to go on that tangent really, but I would say like, okay, maybe a guy like Bernie Sanders isn't like a complete, Wall Street. I don't know that he's really getting any support from them. Again, not really an alignment with a lot of his stuff, but at least dude's like, kind of anti-war. If you're gonna vote Democrat, probably vote Tulsi Gabbard. She's for real anti-war, like for real. Probably the only other, I don't know if Rand Paul's going to run oh no, I guess no. Yeah, he definitely won't because it's Trump. So yeah, that you're probably going to be down to one actual anti-war option on the Democrat ticket, Tulsi Gabbard, but they will demonize her, so nobody will touch her. Somehow they're going to get all my fucking female liberal friends to vote for like some old white guy, which is so funny because, they always, I mean, how often during the week? This is the shit. This is what I say. So, to finish this, this thing off about protesting, it's all done. And now what we see is like these just deranged protests, this like just, I don't know, like anti-Trump, like really like weirdly like made up shit. Like, I mean, what did they go out when Kavanaugh was getting elected? So people will protest that. And, well, I mean, I guess Black Lives Matter was pretty good. I mean, again, I'm not saying it's like 100%. I agree with it down to like, every detail, but the general idea that like black people are getting fucked in a really violent manner in the United States, like, yeah, I agree. And, we've talked about that on past episodes. And I really think that you got to look at the fucking war on drugs as it's really at the core of it. But I think also the sort of welfare state and that sort of cycle that it keeps going, cycle of like dependence and just sort of keeping people sort of trapped in they're locked into this kind of poverty project cycle where violence and drugs and jail and then like broken families and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, big time. So that that was cool, but just all of it seems to fit the agenda, though. That's like kind of the difference, I mean, I don't think that Occupy Wall Street fit anybody's agenda really, out of the two, the major parties. But Black Lives Matter definitely fits a political agenda. Obviously, all of the anti-Trump stuff fits a political agenda. I mean, I would even say like, the anti-war protesting before Obama was elected, it was okay, I guess. I mean, obviously what we learn is it's not in alignment with the Democrat agenda, but I guess if you believe that there really are different groups that are truly competing for the nomination, that it's not just a show, then, maybe for the short-term gain of winning an election or, shifting sentiment or voters their direction, they may have projected anti-war. But obviously once they're in power, it's a different story. Yeah. So now, we don't have this really whatsoever. And it feels like like when is the next time I will have any significant portion of my liberal friends that are really holding a position that is not being propagandized on CNN? When is that time? What will it be? I honestly don't know. I mean, I think that somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, and I think that maybe some people, she'll obviously get some votes, but, it's gonna be like, what's like the best case scenario? Like a Ron Paul sort of situation. You get a few million votes, and you certainly educate a lot of people, but it's not like a major movement or anything. It feels like like somehow what I thought back when I was young, when I was romanticizing the 60s, has really been happening. Even in my lifetime, I've seen the decline in the kind of I don't know, the autonomy of the youth, that it's not really existent anymore. It's like we have a corporate youth now or something. There's so little free thinking. And I don't know, maybe it was like this in the, late 80s, early 90s, and, or up to like 2000s, I guess, whatever, when I was a kid. And I just didn't realize it. I didn't talk to people that much. I mean, for me, I really became active later in my life. I'm trying to think, like, so I was born in 77. So, in 2007, I was 30. So I'd say, my late 20s is where I really kind of like woke up. And before then, I certainly wasn't attending any like protests or anything like that. And I did not vote at all. I was pretty like just kind of angry and just didn't see any point in any of it. I just thought, everybody just seemed like a bunch of liars, and it was confusing, I guess, as a young person. So, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we seem to have moved into this place where there's less opposition, certainly mentally. Again, you judge what was happening in the 60s, and maybe it was romanticized versus, what's happening now. They just seem, college kids today seem, almost in lockstep. And that, it is interesting that I for me, in my experience, how like, it's like I have all these friends and they feel they're so empowered, whether they're, fighting against cis white men or the pay gap or intersectionality or for it, or this gender pay gap. I think that there's something to be said that, most people don't take care to really consider that they are, what they're ignorant of, and something that's like, just to assume that, you look up a few things online and, and all of a sudden, you feel like you need to be like the loudest voice in the room on some economic issue. Normally, I think it's often so ignorant that like these opinions, they don't even think about it, that what they're talking about is an economic issue, from a discipline, economics, and there's no like, I don't know. They're just so like out of their skulls. I would assume it's like, well, they would just get mad at like the idea that they would read, these ideas that were just made by a bunch of white men, so I've been getting pretty annoyed by this lately. Like I said, the gender pay thing kind of pushed me over the edge to just talk about it. But, and I feel like I'm kind of like dealing with this, like a bunch of different places. Like, let me just sort of read over what I have here. Just a few things, but China puts a cap on actor salaries. And I wrote, what about government officials? And then I wrote, fuck China. And I'll read, so Business Insider posted an article, this was like a couple weeks ago, how much money the Game of Thrones stars are making for the final season. Oops, that's just an image. It's actually not nearly as much as you would think. At least I thought it would be more. I don't think this is so Game of Thrones is a colossal hit for HBO. We just had a great episode 3 of season 8, where we finally got to see the culmination of the whole, Night King, Army of the Dead, Winter Coming storyline. So, anyway, I'm a big fan. Game of Thrones is a colossal hit for HBO, and the actor salaries reflect that. Main stars like Kit Harington, who plays Jon Snow, and Lita Headley got big raises in 2017 ahead of the show's final season, which begins Sunday. They now make $500,000 an episode. All right. And I think there are 6 episodes. So, Jon Snow and Cersei will get $3 million total. Tyrion, Daenerys, Jaime Lannister. He seems a bit overpaid. He's not that important, but they're going to wind up with about $1.8 million. So I don't know. Anyway, some of the other ones are going to be making, a little over a million, I think, for this whole season. Sansa Stark, Arya Stark. Oh, you know what? This was for the 3rd season. Oh, this is an old tweet. What? Whatever. It doesn't really matter, right? The point is that this fucking, dummy posts this thing that gets like retweeted and shit and says China recently put a ceiling to what an actor or actress can make for starring in a movie or a TV show, and it starts to take effect immediately. Sometimes it's nice to have a government in power to step in these kind of things, especially when you still have many people living in poverty. What a fucking moron. I mean, that's some of the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, that is fucking insane. Just, it's so fucking retarded. I mean, okay, like maybe if a fucking Chinese official had a literally fucking gun to this person's head or they just tweeted this, maybe that would explain it. But like otherwise, like if this person is like living in a relatively free country, if they're living in the United States or in Korea or something, like what the fuck, man? Like, you could be out of your fucking mind. What a capital actresses? What about the fucking party leaders? What are the people that are fucking murdering people and just like, they're just becoming billionaires over there? They're, oh my God, so fucking stupid. Anyway, there's one I saw. Also, Hong Kong, rich versus poor. We might go back and go into this video a little bit. Unbelievably ridiculous. They're attacking Hong Kong because it has wealthy people and it has poor people. And the comment I wrote, but they never do this stuff in communist countries. China is a fucking million times worse than Hong Kong when it comes to this. Like, give me a break. Some guy, I didn't even put a link to this, but some guy brought gas and lighters into a church in Manhattan. There's like this weird argument about like whether or not to call this terrorism. Like, who gives a shit? Like, yet again, it's like, guy was gonna like burn down a fucking church, because he's all fucking torqued up and crazy. I don't know if this was like after the Christchurch. No, I think this was after Notre Dame. So Notre Dame catches on fire, and then a couple days later, some fucking dingbat professor, it was like some professor from somewhere, was going to like set a church in Manhattan on fire. Like, I think it's like the oldest church in Manhattan. So that's pretty cool. There is a Colorado bill would force kids to learn LGBTQ ideology and ban talk of abstinence. So, I mean, some of these, right? It's like I fucking hate all sides of it, right? Like, people are like, oh, we've got to teach the Bible in schools. And these fucking people are like, oh, we can't teach abstinence. I mean, they're actually getting bills passed that, like, we have to teach LGBT, ideology or whatever. I don't even know what that means really, to kids in school. And it's like, obviously the problem is that there are government schools to begin with. That's why kids are forced to learn things, because some mob rule vote makes it so. And so if the mob's fucking more than, 50% Christian, then we're going to be learning about the Bible in school. Or, if it's fucking more than, whatever, 50%, this like crazy, like liberal ideology now, then they're going to start pushing this kind of stuff. Or, who knows, maybe they'll fucking put a free abortion clinic in the high school, but it's like, yeah, there's actually is a solution to this that is simple, and it's don't make fucking government schools. Let people send kids to whatever school they fucking want, like, my God. There is, what else do we have? Military in Venezuela. There's a video of them just straight up running over people with armored vehicles. So you got that. And then this gender pay thing. So let's just take a quick look. So basically it's like, okay, this rich versus poor, capping the actor salaries, LGBTQ taught in schools, gender pay gap, whatever it is. There doesn't seem to be any racism stuff in here. But all of it is sort of just like around what I guess is this identity politics. And to me, it's just like a continuation of the like infinite goal, right? The infinite goal is to keep the population focused on fighting another part of the population, so that it's, it's like, the illusionists, right? Keep them focused on that while the real trick is going on. The real trick in the Middle East is going on. The real trick in the Federal Reserve is going on, or the real trick in the fucking projects in the United States, where they're fucking running drugs in, and then locking people up that actually buy the drugs that they fucking get allowed to get imported in the first place. But don't look at, just keep focused. If you're a Democrat, stay focused on the straight white man. And if you're, Republicans, make sure you focus on like gay people or whatever, or Muslims, like, and it just has like so many crazy results. Like I definitely attack the left a bit more, and I hear Dave Smith sort of like try to justify or talk about this because people bring it up sometimes. And I don't know, they've really changed a lot over the last few years, and they become like way more illogical, like, I mean, they're so like this weird, like the immigration stuff. Like, to me, if you're anti-Muslim coming into the U.S. and you're pro-war, like, it seems like somewhat coherent. Like, you're killing them, like they're your enemy. You also don't want them here. Like you just really are like anti-Muslim for some reason. Like, so, and I'm not with it, but it's like, okay, but like, with like when you're on the left and you're like all about this, like, being open to all races and religions, and I mean, except for white people and Christianity, particularly white men, but but then like your guy Obama has fucking just demolished the Middle East. It wasn't white people he was dropping a bomb on. That was a fucking a black man ordering 22,000 drone strikes on like Muslim people. I mean, it's like I have so much trouble even like I don't even know how to have like conversations with them anymore. It's just total fucking nonsense, like, and they're going to come here freaking out, preaching to me. But I can't understand because I'm a white man, but somehow everybody else can understand what's inside of my head. But I can't understand anybody else. Like somehow I miss it. Like, what am I missing? Like, explain to me as a cis white male, because obviously I'm so fucking ignorant. I'm so absorbed in my like patriarchy mindset that somehow to me, I'm so stupid that to me, it seems a bit hypocritical to say that you support all religions and people of color, and you freak out on Trump for like wanting to have stronger immigration rules, but then you also are in support of offensive attacking of Muslim countries by our military and intelligence service, and secret drone strikes signed off on by your fucking Lord and Savior Barack Obama. But can you explain, because I need help, right? Like, because I just I can't see that obviously makes sense, and I'm obviously racist for, like, I'm the racist one for being opposed to the genocide that the United States military has been conducting on the Middle East since, like, I don't know, 2001. And I mean, honestly, since like the 50s. Yeah. Oh, God. Shit gets me so fucking pissed off lately. Yeah, I thought that this was I was reading a bit about the Iranian coup, 1953, and some stuff came out. I don't remember why I was reading this, but if you wonder, we always talk about, it's been since the 50s.
It's actually been an open secret for decades, but for the first time now, the CIA has released documents that show its role in the 1953 coup. That is the coup that toppled Iran's democratically elected prime minister. Mohammad Mossadegh had moved to nationalize oil production in Iran. Well, the U.S. was concerned at the time that that would mean a victory for the Soviets in the Cold War. So shortly after his election, the CIA began to plan his overthrow, teaming up with Britain's MI6. Now,
so, I know that was kind of like out of left field, but that was CNN reporting August 23rd, 2013. But yeah, so by their own admission, they had a coup where they took out a democratically elected leader in the 50s. And, so whatever, but somehow, like, me not being into that, I'm racist and I don't get it, Like, me being against the war on drugs, right? That's fucking cis white male. I somehow don't get it. So let's move to these two somewhat more economic things I wanted to talk about. One is this Hong Kong rich versus poor. Don't want to talk about it a ton because it's really the same as the China putting caps on actors' salaries and somebody championing it as if like, oh, see, this is why an authoritarian central government is good, because they can put caps on these salaries. It's sort of very similar, you know what I mean? It's like looking at what China's doing and China is super fucked. Like, we do not want to do what China's doing. And no way. Like, we don't want that here. There's so many people whose lives are awful in China. Yeah, I mean, things are getting better, for sure. But, I mean, if there's one thing that you could say that is better about China than here is I feel like their freedom needle is at least slightly pointed up, while ours is definitely pointed down. You know, we are definitely headed the wrong direction. And to some extent, I mean, at least like some economic freedom is there. But I don't know if that's for everybody either, you know? I mean, yes, there are people that are definitely making out in a sort of by creating companies or whatever, but are they really like creating companies in the way, you know, the way that we think about it here? You know, like how startup, like, you know, just coding kind of nights and weekends, or save up some money so that I can stop working for a few months and try to build an app, or, you know, some idea that, you know, or I've been wanting to start a neighborhood grocery store, you know, something like that. You know, is that the kind of thing that is like happening in China, or are people kind of like getting picked by the, you know, the party elites and being allowed to, you know, to do some things while the rest of the fucking country still, you know, wallows in, you know, relative poverty. But anyway, I mean, I guess if there is real wealth being generated in China, you know, it's certainly better. I just don't know enough to really say for sure. But yeah, anyway, so let's just like really quick listen to some of this, just really just like the intro, you know, how they set it up. I always think, you know, you can tell so much just by, you know, how an article starts, or how a show, you know, its first introduction to the problem. So take a listen.
Welcome to the land of the billionaires. Hong Kong now has the highest concentration of ultra-rich people of any city in the world, just overtook New York. But not everyone has won out of this. So that is what we're here to find out. Why is there so much wealth being attracted to the city? But more importantly, what does it mean for everyone else that lives here?
Yeah. So you can guess, you know, they're going to somehow show that, you know, it's just always the thing, right? Like the free market, that's the big lie. I mean, that is the big lie, that the free market leads to, you know, the concentration of wealth into a very, very small group of people. And it's literally the opposite of the truth. It's the regulations that do it. You know, it goes, look into history of the United States over this last century. Our middle class wealth was getting spread across more and more of the population until they completely took us off the gold standard. I mean, that's why, you know, at the heart of all this shit is the Federal Reserve. Because, like, if you give a shit about poor people, and you give a shit about the middle class, and you don't want the elite, like small elite group of people, to pocket more and more of the wealth, then you need to be opposed to the Federal Reserve System. That's it. Like, that's the place where this is happening. Everything else, all the other stuff, there can be a lot of other contributing factors, but they are details. And that is the headline, you know, that's the main thing, because it affects every fucking dollar in the entire, you know, that's out there in the whole world, all at once. They slowly degrade it by giving their close friends new money at a very, very low interest rate, you know, or even down to zero. And some countries, I think the EU, or it might even have gone negative. They're literally paying their friends to take money. So, you know, that's the big lie that is told, that's just assumed to be a fact, that these, you know, alongside of teaching whatever they're going to teach in Colorado about, you know, lesbianism or something, about being gay, they're also, and they're never gonna, you know, you're never gonna hear it. It's just like, you know, because nobody even knows what the Fed does, right? Like no regular person does in the US, and I'm sure it's exactly the same across the whole world, which basically operates the same way. You know, it's not like the euro is backed by gold. They have a central bank, you know. It's all the same. And it's not even, you know, it's like Voldemort in fucking Harry Potter. I mean, the Fed, it's like you don't even say its name, you know, and that's how they operate. I mean, remember, you probably, if you listen to Dave Smith, remember when he used to be on CNN and he would talk about, like, that is how they would deal with him. Like, they would say, like, you know, blah, blah, blah. And he would say, well, you know, we've actually been bombing this country and, you know, the war in Yemen. And like, instead of engaging and saying why they believe him to be wrong, they just change the subject. They change topics. They just ignore it, you know. Remember that, that Ron Paul thing that Jon Stewart did. Actually, yeah, let me pull that up. This is really funny. All right, here it is. This is from August 15th, 2011.
So now with Pawlenty dropping out, Rick Perry dropping in, and Michelle Bachmann and Ron Paul dominating the Ames straw poll, we got ourselves a race.
We have a top tier. It is Mitt Romney, Rick Perry, and Michelle Bachmann.
We have a new top tier, and it's Perry, Mitt Romney, and Bachmann.
There's now a top tier in this race, at least for now, of Romney, Perry, and Bachmann.
I mean, I think that's fair to say. Really fair to say? You're not forgetting, I don't know, anyone, say an ideologically consistent 12-term congressman who came within less than 200 votes of winning the straw poll? Isn't anyone going to give that gentleman a little love?
There's a top tier now of Bachmann and Perry and Romney, and, you know, we haven't mentioned, and we should.
Thank you.
We haven't mentioned, and we should, Rick Santorum, who did really surprisingly well for the amount of money and resources he had.
Rick Santorum? He didn't get half of what Ron Paul got. He lost to the guy who lost so bad he dropped out of the race. Santorum?
We're looking at Mitt Romney, who continues to be the front runner, but we have Rick Perry as well, and now Michelle Bachmann. Let's not count out John Huntsman, though.
What? John Huntsman? Huntsman got 69 votes. If all of John Huntsman's supporters met at the same Ames, Iowa Quiznos, the fire marshal would say, yeah, that's fine, no problem. There's still some tables open in the back. Huntsman was the only Mormon running in the straw poll, and he came in second amongst Mormons. And by the way, this pretending Ron Paul doesn't exist for some reason has been going on for weeks.
A new Gallup survey showing Rick Perry running second to Mitt Romney, knocking down Iowa favorite Michelle Bachmann to fourth.
Behind who? Fourth behind who? How did libertarian Ron Paul become the 13th floor in a hotel? Why? What's wrong with... He is Tea Party patient zero. All that small government grassroots business, he planted that grass. These other folks, they're just moral majorities in a tri-cornered hat. Ron Paul's the real deal, and Fox News should love this guy. But watch the disconnect between the debate moderators at Fox's Thursday debate and the debate audience.
Iran does not have an air force that can come here, just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and they had nuclear weapons, and we had to go in. I'm sure you supported that war as well. Yeah. Okay. It's time we quit this. It's time. It's trillions of dollars we're spending on these wars.
What's with the smirk and the eye roll? The guy gives it, the crowd goes nuts, and you do one of these. There goes crazy Uncle Ron, babbling about the unsustainability of multiple wars. He's the one guy in the field, agree with him or don't agree with him, who doesn't go out of his way to regurgitate talking points or change what he believes to fit the audience he's in front of. And you're treating him like if this were Celebrity Apprentice, he'd be this guy. By the way, at the Ames, Iowa straw poll, Busey beat Huntsman 77-69. And even when the media does remember Ron Paul, it's only to reassure themselves how there's no need to remember Ron Paul.
Right now, live, right next to the bus behind us, Ron Paul is speaking. And 7 of the candidates are here today. We have live pictures of Ron Paul, but you know what? We're talking about Sarah Palin, we're talking about Rick Perry, the two people not in the race yet, Drew.
And guess what, Paul? If you get video of Sarah Palin or get a soundbite from her, bring that back to us. You can hold the Ron Paul stuff.
right? I mean, that guy, right? We'll be right back.
Shit. So, it's been going on for a long time. And so I think that this is the way that the media operates. I don't know, some fucking, psychological studies were done to say that the best thing to do is just to keep ignoring it. I don't know. Maybe we should, who could we ignore? Should we ignore, see, it doesn't work for us, If you ignore the Middle East, well, they just keep killing everybody there. Should we ignore the IRS? They send people to your door because you haven't paid in 10 years to kick it in and take you to jail and just ignore them. I don't know. It just doesn't work our way. I guess it works as long as you have a bunch of people with guns that aren't ignoring, but somehow, again, don't look at them, look at the person, that's in front of the camera, that is like pretending that Ron Paul doesn't exist, that's pretending that we're not in all these wars in the Middle East, that we're not, that our troops aren't there murdering, committing homicide on a daily basis, ignore that, the Federal Reserve exists and it's every single day, every second of every single day is slowly bleeding out the poor and the middle class in this country. Don't pay attention to any of that. Just ignore it. Just don't ever say it. So that's how they operate there. And it was good. It's nice to hear Ron Paul's voice talking about what's going on in China. Sorry, I just read China. What was going on in the Middle East? And it's crazy. So that was leading into 2012. I mean, we were probably already going into, there's probably already Syria, Libya, or I don't know, maybe Egypt had happened at that point. I don't know. I'm not sure about Yemen, but woof. So we had that. And then, so again, right. In summation, the problem, whatever is facing Hong Kong in, wealth inequality, it is not the fault of freedom. And that's the lie that they're going to tell you. That's the lie that they're coming at people, And again, my friends, they are defenseless. They're having these lies told to them in so many creative different ways, and just drilling home this idea that freedom is their enemy. You know, that is the thing, that people should not be able to own, you know, their own bodies. They should not be able to do what they want to it. You know, with this vaccine stuff recently, you know, they've found a new way, right? A new line to cross now. Now we're going to all be forced to have vaccines. And, you know, now once you're able to force people to have vaccines, because they've convinced people now that our actual own human bodies are weapons against everybody else. Just, you know, just simply by existing now, you're a threat. And you have to submit to the will of the government. And it has to be the federal government. There is no possible voluntary solution to this. Nobody would even consider it. So anyway, I saw my little cousin shared this, and she's a very sweet girl. And interestingly, she is definitely coming out of like a very conservative family, if I'm not mistaken. But she shared this today. Iceland has made it illegal to pay women less than men. Now, this was actually from 2018, so it's like a year old. A new law in Iceland will make it illegal to pay women less than men came into effect on January 1st, 2018. Companies will now have to obtain certification for demonstrating equal pay. That's the pain of it, right? And Iceland has been ranked best in the world for gender pay equality for 9 years in a row. So, do you think they ever define gender pay equality? I don't think so. And the certification, that's the thing, right? It's more fucking paperwork. It's just like more bureaucracy, and, you know, less. It makes the barrier to entry for business a little bit harder, right? And doesn't have to be one thing, right? If this was the only law in the world and then that was it and everything else was a free market, it wouldn't be that big a deal, right? I mean, everybody would know. There would be fucking companies that would help you fill out your gender equality pay certification, and, you know, you'd be easy peasy, but it would only be one sort of fake industry would be created. There'd be one fake industry, and that industry would be to help people to file gender equality certifications. And then after that, it would be like actual pure free market. Sure, we could withstand it, but there are fucking thousands of these things, you know, and there's like a huge portion of the economy. I don't mean like 90% or something, but just, you know, big, I'm sure it took billions of dollars of businesses that are built to help you stay in compliance, right? I mean, TurboTax is the big obvious one that like almost everybody knows about, right? Tax preparation stuff or whatever. But there's all kinds of shit, right? I mean, it's mainly, I guess, just handled by like lawyers and stuff. But yeah, you know, I mean, if we were in a free market, there would be a hell of a lot less lawyers in the world. You know, just would be simpler. You wouldn't need to fill out like fucking all this paperwork to do stuff like that. It'd be all about like contracts and stuff, and like, you know, maybe lawyers for that, but that's like a different thing. So Iceland has made it illegal to pay men more than women. Like, I mean, right there, right? Like, without any context, that's just like nuts, right? Like what does that mean? It's just it's just like a nonsense, just meaningless sentence. It's illegal to pay men more than women for doing the same job, I guess. Does anybody do the same job either? You know, like, I mean, is it based on the title? Like, when you think about the effects of something like this, and like, how is it actually legislated? How is it enforced? You know, what are the rules? You know, like, because no matter what they do, people are gonna just get around it as best they can to run their business the way that they would if this didn't exist. You know, but like, Yeah, you know what I mean? It's just like, okay, like, I'm sure that they would just have some metrics. Like, if you've been here X number of years and you have this title, then you make this much money and it doesn't matter. I mean, why would you want to implement something like that in a company? Like, what? You know what I mean? It's basically like they're trying to turn private companies through this into the same sort of non-productive pieces of shit that like government offices are, you know, where you just have a bunch of people just basically on the dole. There's no pressure to really perform. All it matters is that you just fucking stay around for the same amount of time. It doesn't matter if you're good at your job or not. It just matters like how many years have you survived, and you know, just. Or like, is it going to mean that it's like, hey, look, if we keep you next year, you know, we're going to have to give you a raise, and you're not really that good. Now, if we didn't have this legislation, we could just keep you on and not give you a raise, but we're going to fire you because, you know, we don't want to give you a raise, and we can hire somebody and train them and pay them less. And, you know, since you're not that great, like that's good for us. It's worth it. It wouldn't be worth it if we didn't have to give you a raise. But because we have to give you a raise, now you don't have a fucking job. Great. There's your equality. A new law enforcing equal pay between genders came in effect on January 1st, according to Al Jazeera. Why would Al Jazeera be the ones reporting what's happening in Iceland? Under the legislation, firms that employ more than 25 people are obliged to obtain a government certificate demonstrating pay equality, or they will face fines. And you know what happens? And they'll destroy a business if you don't pay them. At least with like businesses, at least in the U.S., like at least like a person is not going to go to jail for that, because you can, you know, create a corporation that like those fines are levied against a corporation. But, you know, so there's not necessarily like the threat of imprisonment, I guess. The law was announced on March 8th on International Women's Day as part of a drive nation to eradicate the gender pay gap by 2022. And I mean, this gender, let's finish this. Danny whatever, I can't read this name, it's really weird and long, on the Icelandic Women's Rights Icelandic Women's Rights Association told Al Jazeera the legislation is basically a mechanism that companies and organizations evaluate every job that's being done, and then they get a certification after they confirm the process if they're paying men and women equally. She added, it's a mechanism to ensure women and men are being paid equally. Just keep saying the same thing. We have had legislation saying that pay should be equal for men and women for decades now, but we still have a pay gap. This Nordic country, home to more than 323,000 people, has been ranked best in the world for gender equality. I mean, like, who gives a fuck? Like, you're comparing Iceland to the United States. We have 323 million people. Like, it's like, I think too, a lot of times it's like the United States is compared to Australia often, like as if that is like this really similar country to the United States. I think Australia has like 20 million people in it. That's like the fucking population of Pennsylvania or something. Spread across a fucking huge continent, you know? Like, it's so fucking dispersed. Anyway, I think now people are starting to realize this is a systematic problem. We have to tackle it with new methods. Yes, government force. That's the new method. Nearly 50% of parliament is women. UK reported a 16.9% pay gap between men and women in 2017. Okay. I mean, they're not even sources for any of this. Like, what the fuck? Like, you talk about, like, a fake news article. I mean, what, like... I mean, there literally, there's no... I mean, unless I don't know how to use Business Insider... but I don't see any sources for any of this that they're saying, you know? But yeah, the whole pay gap thing, my understanding is that it actually was really, really ridiculous. Like, generally, the number that's like cited by everybody, it's basically just saying like, okay, this is the sum of all the salaries of women in the United States divided by the number of women in the United States, and this is the sum of all the salaries of men in the United States divided by men. Oh, look, there's a pay gap. Women should make more. Women aren't getting paid equally as men. Like, I mean, that's right. Like, there's no accounting for what job people are doing. I mean, it's just like it's flat out wrong. And, it's another example of this, like, how am I supposed to, like, reasonably feel like having an engaged conversation, when that is, like, an assumed fact, an assumed fact that in their mind, I mean, that's the thing. It's like what it translates into, like, the average person's mind is that, like, a woman and a man that are doing the identical amount of work, the man is getting paid more. That's like significantly more. And I promise you, that's how it is interpreted. And all these fucking companies, parrot this shit, and they all like pander to this fucking, all these like, identity politics things. And I don't know where it's going, man. Like, I don't like it's this is a little bit of a sidebar, but when I first found out that Trump was running for president, I thought it was a joke. And when I saw like people, we want to see the debates and everything, I was actually like annoyed. I was just like, man, like this shit is not a joke, man. Like, the fucking like government is committing like atrocities, and and we're just sitting here like chuckling about, oh, this guy is running for president, and I just thought he was just an absurd, ridiculous person, over the last like 2 years, I have like become so much more friendly to him. Just whatever, just like the idea of Trump is so much less distasteful after seeing just like the absurd amount of like just bullshit, just fucking hurled his way, and at like his supporters. It's like the left has just like become this like fucking ugly thing over the last 2 or 3 years. And I'm in no way like, gonna vote for Trump or anything like that. And there was a couple months ago, I had an episode where there was a bit of optimism particularly about foreign policy stuff, Middle East and everything. And, for me, that's largely gone now. I mean, I'm back to like hanging on to, I guess like North Korea stuff is pretty good. That's good. But in the Middle East, why, he's like, why is he really pursuing this Yemen thing? And, and whatever, I'm not into it. But the thing is, it's like, but these fucking ding dongs on the left are like really up in arms about the Yemen thing. It's like, like Obama is the one that started the fucking war. Like, Trump's just talking about continuing it. And I don't know why. It's very inconsistent with what he says, right? He says he wants to pull out of the Middle East and all this stuff. That's just shit. Like, Obama didn't even fucking say it. Obama just like added fucking wars to the list, But for some reason, he's just very into Yemen. I think Trump is like very pro Saudi Arabia, very pro Israel. So like, I think in his mind, he doesn't really see like, what the fuck are we attacking like Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria and stuff like, but he I think maybe he kind of has this connection with like Yemen, and since it's like a Saudi Arabia war, that we should support Saudi Arabia because that's like our main foothold. But whatever. Anyway, slice it. Like, he's on the side of fucking, continuing the worst human, crisis that's going on in the world today. And that's one that Obama started. So, I mean, there's no safe place on the main political spectrum from this. I mean, both sides are fucking just, their hands are covered in blood at this point with Yemen. And these fucking these just like unbelievably pompous, just fucking self-justified people, my friends, that are so anti-Trump. It's like, yo, you're not against this. You supported the shit out of this, this is Obama's thing, man. Trump's just trying to take it home. I mean, and it's whatever. Anyway, but so you have these conversations, you have these insane things about pay gap thrown in your face, or how, somehow Hong Kong's this awful place, right? It's all lie. And it's lies that are just being pumped into their fucking heads all the time, I mean, now it's the Captain Marvel movie. I think we talked about that before. You know what I mean? That's another thing. It's everything becomes this weird battle, this weird dividing line. So it's yeah, it's so you have to pick certain movies based on it, your identity politics, the last couple of weeks, so the Philadelphia Flyers had this tradition of this woman, Kate Smith, singing the national anthem, or singing God Bless America. And they had a really great record when she sang, and she passed away, and then they used to play a recording of it, and they did really well or something. It was a tradition. Anyway, apparently something came out. There's some recordings of her singing a couple songs that were very racist. And this is way a long fucking time ago. I might even been in the fucking 20s. I don't know how long ago this was. But anyway, so the Flyers covered up her statue outside and then tore it down, and they basically just totally we're just oh, we didn't realize this, and we want nothing to do, and completely disavow Kate Smith, and when I listen to the radio, this one big Flyers guy, it's always Flyers, it's always talking about it, he's just trying to play it down, but just oh, well, we didn't really use that Kate Smith thing that much. And it's dude, man, that fucking shit was almost venerated a holy moment whenever they would play that song, I mean, people really fucking loved it, and they just tore it all down because of this. And then I just was reading, somebody was posting, it's look, man, if you should really read a little bit more about Kate Smith as a person. And she was actually involved with civil rights stuff. She had they had some specific examples, and apparently these songs came from some recording on Broadway that had something to do with it was showing the plight of slaves or some shit like that. I don't know, but it was, it was just a rate. It was in the, it's with somebody, if you watch a movie where somebody plays a slave owner and they act in a racist way, and then imagine, 100 years later, somebody uncovers just that recording. Well, they probably uncover the whole thing, but then they cut out just the recording where that person's acting racist, and they say, I can't believe you have this statue up here. Look at this racist thing that this person did. And people are oh my God, get rid of it. Oh, I can't believe that they were racist, 100 years ago. And it's yo, it was a fucking movie about slavery. It's just, it's fucking insane, And I don't know shit about, maybe this guy was off in some of his facts or something. I don't know. But all I'm saying is I promise nobody took the fucking time to look into it. They just piled on whatever side they were already on. Because, and what do we basically always come down to? It's because they have no like underlying guiding principles. The Republicans and the Democrats, they don't have a way to reason out what should be done, or how like what opinion they should take. It's like they just do not have guiding principles. And so in that world, the most important thing has nothing to do with like economics, has nothing to do with politics or anything like that. It's just like identity. It's not politics, it's identity politics, and it's taken over. And like, it's also taken over the Republicans too. Like it's both ways. It's not like one side or, is only playing the game and the other side's not, I mean, I could say maybe like the left is a little more dug in and the conservatives are more like responding to it, but so anyway, I really didn't have any like, there weren't like specific news stuff I wanted to talk about. The biggest thing that happened was those Sri Lankan bombings on Easter, at least from my opinion. So one thing there was this Venezuelan thing that I saw today, and there's an uprising, and I keep saying I'm gonna like work more on bring Venezuela in because it's a pretty big deal. But here's a link from this was on the front page of antiwar.com. It's actually an Al Jazeera article, but it says Venezuela in crisis, all the latest updates. Opposition leader Juan Guaido calls for military uprising as government says forces remain loyal. Venezuela has plunged into a major political crisis amid a growing row over President Nicolas Maduro's future as the country's leader. Maduro started his second term on January 10th following a widely boycotted election last year that many foreign governments refused to recognize. On January 23rd, Juan Guaido, leader of the opposition-controlled National Assembly, declared himself interim president. Shortly after Guaido took an oath swearing himself in, U.S. President Donald Trump publicly recognized him as the country's leader. Maduro accused Guaido of staging a coup and ordered his arrest. Here are all the latest updates of Tuesday, January 30th. White House, all options on the table. The White House says it hopes an attempted military uprising in Venezuela will be enough to tip leader Nicolas Maduro out of power. National Security Advisor John Bolton says Tuesday that what's happening is clearly not a coup because the U.S. and many other countries recognize opposition leader Juan Guaido as Venezuela's legitimate president. So, wow. I don't know. It just sounds like this guy just said he was president, basically, and we were like, yeah. Bolton declined to discuss possible action, military or otherwise, by the U.S. Bolton says only that all options are on the table. EU calls for utmost restraint in Venezuela crisis. The European Union Tuesday called for utmost restraint in Venezuelan crisis as the government vowed to put down what it called an attempted coup by U.S.-backed Juan Guaido. The EU closely followed the latest events in Venezuela. We reiterate that there can only be a political, peaceful, and democratic way out for the multiple crises in the country is facing. EU diplomatic chief, Frederica, somebody said in a statement, Leopold Lopez seeks asylum in Chile embassy. Who cares? Brazil sees point of no return in Venezuela. Brazil's vice president says the situation in Venezuela has reached a point of no return. Former General Hamilton Mourão said Tuesday that either opposition leaders Juan Guaido and Leopold Lopez would be prisoners. The president, Nicolas Maduro, would be leaving. whatever, says there's no way out of this. U.S. Bolton presses key aides to Venezuela Maduro to abandon him. I'm trying to see if there's anything interesting. Venezuela's foreign minister Jorge Araiza denied there was a military coup attempt underway to oust Maduro and accused Guaido of operating under orders from the United States. It's not a coup attempt from the military. This is directly planned in Washington, in the Pentagon, and the Department of State, and by Bolton. Araiza told reporters in a phone interview from Caracas, referring to U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton. They are leading this coup and giving orders to this man, he said, and he was referring to Juan Guaido. He said Maduro has been in power since 2013, when he's in full control of the country with the backing of the military. He is in his place of command as always, and he is in control of the situation. He's making government decisions as he does every day. Turkey's Erdogan condemns the coup attempt in Venezuela. Condemn the coup attempt. So that's kind of interesting, right? Erdogan is supposed to be like another example of like a Trump-esque nationalist figure, and in the rest out in the rest of the world, like that. We're supposed to be so scared of Trump because not only is he doing all this terrible stuff here, he's also triggering similar things around the world. But here, he clearly this guy is in total opposition to Trump and actually with the EU. UN chief urges maximum restraint. Anyway, so basically, John Bolton, the FAMB must protect the Constitution of the Venezuelan people. It should stand by the National Assembly and the legitimate institutions against the usurpation of democracy. The United States stands with the people of Venezuela. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, I don't know what, really what the deal is with Maduro and Guaido. From what I understand, Maduro is basically the president. What's that little clip where the CIA admitted to the coup, being part of the coup in Iran in '53, and I'm sure they've done it countless times since then. And would you really be surprised if it's any different now? I mean, to me, it's like, seems pretty like straight up, pretty clear. What they're saying seems to hold a lot of water, that it's like, hey, this guy had been in control since like 2013. He was reelected. And then all of a sudden now it's just like this insane, uprising and the military, a coup. So we will see. But, that's what's going on right now. They're on, they're facing sort of very similar, it sounds like, very similar situation there as to like what a lot of the people in the Middle East have been facing for, nearly the last 20 years, certainly since 2001, and to a large extent for 50 years before that too. So, it sucks. It's pretty crazy that there's not even like an attempt to like make a terrorist group or some way to like get the US on board. They're just like, fuck it. Like, we're just gonna like put a different leader in there. So yeah, anyway, so that's that. So yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up there. I don't really know how to sum this up. I was pretty just annoyed for the last couple of weeks and kept, been wanting to take little notes and wanting to talk on the podcast. And, that this is essentially what I wanted to do, is just kind of vent a bit and talk about a bunch of different stupid shit people have been talking about. lately, and all the lies, exposing all of the lies, whistling in the dark. So yes, I hope you've been enjoying this spring weather. It has been quite beautiful down in Atlanta. This is the best spring we've had in a while, and I think I'm gonna sign off and go sit on my porch and enjoy a cigar. Peace.